Scott forced me to get because I thought the other one sucked. So
All right. Well, welcome. My name is Stephen Robbins, and I am here today with Michael Weening, the CEO of Calix. We're going to be discussing culture. Michael is one of the more unusual CEOs that I've ever spoken with because he has experience in not just multiple countries, multiple continents. Furthermore, he has managed pretty much every functional area of a business, everything from marketing to operations to sales. And now he's at an executive level, which gives him a cross-function, well, he's a CEO, president and CEO, which gives him a cross-functional view of the business and pretty much responsibility for everything, both the business systems and the people systems. So if there is anyone who is qualified to talk about elements of business culture, how it plays out in different geographic cultures, how it plays out in different functions, that's Michael. Welcome, Michael.
thank you for having me, Steve.
So, I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us because I'm sure your time is very valuable. And maybe you could talk to that.
You want to kick off on that right off the bat?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah.
One of the questions you asked me in the pre was, what are one of the things that I don't like being asked? Actually, it's not something I don't like being asked. It's actually I don't like that statement. And I think that we're going to talk about leadership here. I think that's one of the worst things possible. And people often say to me, thanks for making the time. I know your time is so valuable. And especially customers, when they say it to me, it really bothers me because my time is as valuable as their time and as your time. And so, whenever someone says that to me, I say, please don't say that because, your time is just as valuable as mine. And I think that as leaders, that's really important to me to remember all the time because in the end, what we do, we're here to serve the people who are on our teams. We're here to serve our customers and our partners. And, it's a horrible saying because your time is really valuable too. So thank you for your time, which is so incredibly valuable to have a good conversation and learn from each other. I appreciate it.
Boom, you got me because now I can't say, oh no, our time is equally valuable because you've already taken that point. My first, I just want to stick on this for a second, even though it was kind of just, a fun opening. But I still remember one of the most formative moments in my business, in my formation as a business person, is when I was just out of undergrad. I was 23 years old. I went on a business trip with a senior member of my company, and we were at a client site, and we were doing some kind of buffet thing, and he accidentally knocked over a cup of coffee, and he just left it there. And, someone
What?
ran out to clean it.
He didn't
Yeah.
clean it?
And I said, Don, why don't you clean it? And he said, well, my time is way too valuable for that at what they're paying me. So they should have someone else do it. Now, since you have been at every level of a company and you certainly have P&L responsibilities. So, at the end of the day, you need to decide how much you're paying in wages, how much, what your budget should be, what you're going to get for it. If I'm a new leader in a business, I'm just starting to get into management, maybe I have some degree of P&L responsibility. How should I be thinking about people and their time other than just as a budgetary number?
Well, so first of all, I'm going to call BS on what that guy said. And he's not actually thinking about my time as valuable. That's just arrogance. Flat out, absolutely. He thinks he's more important than somebody else. And I think that's a very dangerous place to be. I'll tell you a story. When I first joined Calix, our founder, a guy named Carl Russo, right? And Carl has founded 3 multi-billion-dollar companies, which in itself it makes him a unicorn.
Wow.
Right? You look at Calix, or he's been actually sold them off, right? The first 2, last one prior to Calix was 7 billion. The one before he sold for 2 billion. So, he's been pretty actively involved as a leader in very successful companies. And I remember this moment that it was one of our first leadership meetings, and we were at this U-shaped table, and we were all having like a working lunch, and he got up and he did what I've seen very few people do. He actually got up and started cleaning other people's plates. And, I was struck by that because of the fact that I've seen a lot of other people do those kind of things. But someone like him, who's a multi-billionaire, like all those types of elements, he could adopt the view that leader had with you where, go pick up that coffee, right? Or he could do what he did. and that's who he is. And I think, and I've seen a lot of leaders who are like that, and those are the type of people I try to model myself after, which is that humility, that recognition that, we're all just humans, we're all equals. And so while there's hierarchy, I think of hierarchy for process in business. I don't think of hierarchy as in how we operate. So, for example, one of the things I'm really adamant on is that I want all team members, and not all people feel comfortable about this because they don't trust that I believe it because they've lived in hierarchy organizations. I say, don't let me be wrong, which is if you think I'm wrong, ping me, talk to your boss, reach out to me, send me an email, send me a text message. And, three things are going to happen. The first one is I'm going to say thank you because I appreciate that someone has enough trust in me because obviously, hierarchy is something that we all have lived with in companies. And Lord knows when I was at places like Microsoft, I dealt with those egomaniacs who, how dare you talk to me as a lowly sales rep or a manager when I'm the SVP or whatever, right? They have those huge rotten egos, right? And so people are scared of that. So the first thing is they say to me, hey, Michael, I think you're wrong. And here's the reason. Then I'll thank them. And then one of two things will happen. One, they're right. And I'll go, yeah, okay. And in fact, there was someone who pounded me on recently and said, I found a LinkedIn post that I did a year ago. So this was about a year ago. And they said, you used all caps. That's obnoxious. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. That's yelling. I shouldn't ever do that. So I went in and I edited the LinkedIn post and I said, and turned it into a softer version of it to make the same point, right? And then I said, thank you. Hey, I appreciate the feedback. And it doesn't mean that we're always going to agree, which is the second one. Sometimes with folks, I don't necessarily agree, which is fine. We can agree to disagree, or they're wrong. In which case, if they're one of our team members, that represents a significant opportunity because if they think that way about our strategy or something like that, I can give them the broader picture because maybe they have, their job's in a silo, right? And therefore they don't understand the bigger picture. I hopefully can help them understand why their view is wrong in the context of our broader corporate strategy. And then what I can do is take a step back and thank them again, because if they think that way, chances are there's other people in the company who also think that way. And ultimately that means that myself as a leader, I need to step back and say, wait, if they believe that and other people believe it, then I'm not communicating effectively or my team members aren't communicating effectively. So we need to take a moment and clarify. And so back to, it all comes out of that little coffee. I think that there's all kinds of permutations which reach out through how we act as leaders every single day. And so that's how I try to model myself. And let's be honest. I know through my career, some of the greatest learnings I've ever had is through when I've been wrong and made big mistakes. And I the reason why I've been able to be successful is because I've had all kinds of people who care enough about me, have my back, and actually have been willing to say, hey, you're wrong, and wake up, and then teach me a lesson. And then as long as I can always constantly take that inside and realize that even at my age, and we were just joking about our ages, right? I'm 55. I still have lots to learn. And I think it was, I have this placard that my boys gave me for Father's Day, 15 years ago. And it says, it's from Michelangelo. It's one of my favorite quotes. And it says, I'm still learning. I think he wrote this when he was 80.
Wow.
Right? And so, even if that's just an urban myth, it sounds good. So Michelangelo wrote that at 80. And I think that's the point, is I hope that the day I stop learning is the day I die, frankly.
So what you just described is a practice that you have in terms of asking for feedback, et cetera. And you described it pretty much in terms of your ability to use that as a development opportunity for yourself and for your people.
Sure.
How do you think about that as a modeling of behavior? Because one of the things that I had a CEO say to me once, he was the CEO of an upper Fortune 500 company. So he had so many people reporting to him that there would be no way even to ever learn their names, because by the time he got through the first, 3,000 of them, there would have been so much turnover. And I said, in a company that large with that many people, how do you actually do stuff, given that you clearly, the vast bulk of your 80,000 employees are never going to see or hear you? And he said, one of the major tools in my tool chest is modeling and being a visible example of culture. Can you speak to that a little bit? Because I think, what you described it in a very kind of tactical way with you and the people who report to you. But, clearly you're thinking culture. That's our topic
Yeah,
today.
well, so I would agree with them. I think modeling and actually being available. So there's with the beauty of technology today is that unlike again when we were getting introduced, you were talking about ARPANET and all those things and dating us in a very big way.
Yes.
Those late '80s technologies, right? And so now with Zoom and all these other elements, there's so many ways to get feedback, and I think there's kind of two parts to it. First, you have to be willing to accept feedback, right? And as a leader, that's the danger of hubris and arrogance is that when you think, if you start, reading your own press, so to speak, then you start thinking you're smarter than everybody else. And I'm sure, and I know through my, 25, 30-year career, there have been times where I have, gotten to a place where I'm like, oh yeah, I'm really smart and those kind of places. And then you get smacked down and realize, oh, you're not. You need to, you should never do that. You should constantly be learning. And then you kind of check your ego and go back to try to always learn. But, so you have to be willing to learn. I think that's the first thing. And you have to be willing to take feedback and make it safe for people. And then there's so many ways to do it. So you can do it through town halls. You can do it through just asking them to send you notes. You can actually enable your team to come and give you feedback. And I find that virtual town halls are a really, really great way to do it. So, for example, with all new employees, I try to run, although I keep falling a little bit behind, but on a monthly basis, new team members as they join the company, I try to do an open hour. And all of the executives on my executive leadership team, they actually do the same thing. They spend an hour with new hires, and it's just open Q&A. Hey, you want to hear about how you joined the company? You want to hear I got a question, what I'm thinking about? Because the other part too is new employees these days research who they want to join because they have a choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so giving them access to ask a ton of questions that are going their onboarding to myself and my peers, so the executive leadership team who I work with, having that opportunity is really great, but you have to be willing to open yourself up and have those conversations. And so I think that's a really healthy thing to do. And these days you can do town halls en masse, where it used to be like go back 15 years ago and I'd have to fly to every city and try to get people, and you only get half the people there. Half the people can't do it because they're meeting other commitments and on and on and on. Technology makes it a wonderful opportunity. And someone just told me a story, I can't remember who it was, about the American Express CEO and how when American Express had this big tower filled with people, he would always get into the elevator and he would start talking to the people around him. He wouldn't look at his phone, right? And I found that really profound, because I think that in essence is if you want to talk the talk, walk the walk, right? I
Yep.
think that's a great example of engaging with people, right? And they always found it shocking that, oh my gosh, he's the CEO. He's so busy. His time's so important. How is he not, he's talking to me, right? And and then the last part of it I'll say is, I think as leaders, we need to remember when we were 25, because the other part too is that the things that we say, and I remember when I was young, hey, I got to meet somebody and they said something to me, and it can be either soul destroying or it can be empowering, right? Hey, they ignored me. I'm not important. Hey, they took a moment and they asked me how I was, or I said something to them and they, reinforced that it was a good thing, so that it boosted me up and improved my morale, right? And I'll never forget, I went into an elevator with a very famous sales executive leader. And I said hi to him, introduced myself, and then he basically said hi, ignored me, and went on his phone. And to this day, I remember that moment. And by the way, that radically shaped my perception of that individual.
Yeah. I think those moments, they're the sort of thing that sometimes you know them when they're happening. And then sometimes you can look back. At one of my very first jobs, I was asked to do something unethical. And I wrote it up. This was after business school, and I wrote it up as a business school case. And I sent it to my lifetime mentor. And I said, "This is a real life case. I would like two pieces. I'd like you to answer two questions. One, is my analysis correct? Like what I believe my choices and my trade-offs here are, the damage that could be done if I do it or if I don't do it. Is my analysis correct? And two, should I do what will advance my career, or should I do the right thing?" And he sent back a 5-word response. Yes, analysis correct, do the right thing. And
Yeah, of course.
that, if he had said to do it the other way, I probably would have had a very different career, because I would have gone, oh, okay, I guess that in business you
Well, and to
screw
your
people
point, then
over.
for the rest, right, the rest of your life, you would have been compliant, and I need to bend, I need to cheat or whatever it is to. And if someone asks me to do it, yeah, I've had those situations too. In fact, what's not on my LinkedIn is actually a company I worked for 3 months. I got recruited out of Dell, and the whole recruitment pitch was you're gonna make more money you've ever made in your life. And I was a successful sales rep at Dell. They threw insane amount of money at me. I was there for 3 months, and I just realized that they were evil. It was an evil company, and so and everything that they were doing was I found them unethical. I didn't like and they were doing bad things in the evenings, cheating on their wives, all that kind of stuff. And I just found them unethical. And so, and they wanted me to do unethical things, stuff the channel to actually make numbers. And I'm like, I was gone in 3 months. I was just like, I will not set my ethics aside for anybody. Right.
Yeah. And by behaving that way yourself as a leader, you're sending that same message to everyone else that,
Sure. Absolutely.
So
100%.
the topic that first caused us to have a little back and forth on LinkedIn was grind culture. And
Yeah.
as luck would have it, just today, I saw somebody posting a thing which said, after 3 years of working 19-hour days and not taking any vacations and not doing anything for myself or my family or anything that would nurture my mind, I've decided to take a week off. And he presented this as a personal failing that he was, struggling to overcome. And I just kind of read that and, went, Um, what
That
is,
is that's like, oh, look at me. I'm such a sacrifice that I've made, and now I'm going to take a week off. That's silly.
yeah. So tell me about grind culture, because you have some real specific opinions about it and about what is and isn't
Yeah.
necessary and what it even means.
Well, so look, um, grinding, like grinding it out for a period of time, you're going to go through those periods in your career all the time, right? Someone who says, "Well, I don't want to work 40-hour weeks or 80-hour weeks, and I just want to have a great life." Okay, that's your choice. You are constantly compared to the people around you and what you output. That's business, right? And so this concept of having to grind is something I firmly believe in. Throughout my entire career, work ethic was something that I was taught as a young man. And I had a paper route when I was, I don't know, grade 6. And, I had jobs all through high school and all those kind of things. And grind means different things for different people. That's kind of because we didn't have Apple computers, the rich kids did and stuff like that. So I had to work really hard to earn everything. And my children and a lot of children I know, they have it a lot harder in school than we had it. If I think back to high school in the 80s, it was nothing compared to what the kids go through today. Like high school is grind culture for these kids to get into university. And so I think grind as a word is something that we all need to accept. Everyone's got to do it. You got to grind your way through times. The key thing is you can't burn out. And that's where I really take exception with the grind culture, because a grind culture leads to one thing, and that's burnout. And this guy who's saying, I did it for 3 years, to your point, if he's a manager, he's a horrible manager, because what he's doing is he's actually not taking the time to take vacation, recharge, clear his brain. And I guarantee he's not as effective as other people, because the simple reality is that you become mentally exhausted. And every study out there shows that if you're not getting sleep and if you're not diversifying your mind and having free time to think and all these different things, you are going to be a poor performer. So I think we have to grind. That's illogical not to say that that's not going to happen. But grind as a culture is a very bad idea, which is why one of the things that I try to do regularly with the leaders is we actually pull reports on vacations. And most people, when you hear that you're pulling reports on vacations, what they think about is checking out for people who are taking enough vacation. From the first time I became a manager, I pulled vacation to find out who wasn't taking enough and actually set them down. And I've done this many times in my career. I've set them down and said, stop, take holiday. And the reason why is whether or not you have a family and a partner and kids, or it's not about that. It's actually, if you don't take the time to take a break from what you're grinding away at, you will be less effective because you haven't had time to properly rest. And all the psychological studies talk about how important sleep is for your long-term health, for your cognitive abilities, for your, not being snappy at your team members because you're crabby and exhausted, right? So sleep and relaxing is really important. But then the other part too is how many great ideas have you had, and this is my experience, when you've actually been on holiday and your mind is free to just wander, right? That true ability to just free your mind is really, really important. And then the last part is diversity of things that you do. If you only do one thing and all you do is work, and you don't have diversity with regards to interests and all the other things, it makes it hard for you to, that diversity is valuable for how you do your role, right? It allows you to connect with people, and connection with people is really important because you can find common interests with folks, but also different perspectives, right? Read a book, watch a movie, take a photo, and then, it just opens your mind to other things. And then that conscious, when you're back in the office and you're thinking about a problem or whatever, that diversity of thinking just helps you be a better person and a better team member.
So we may not all want to be capital R Renaissance people, but we can be like little R Renaissance people.
Yeah, it's a great point. Like capital R Renaissance person to me feels like a lot of friggin' work, right? So all those people are like, oh, I'm an artist and I can play the guitar and I can play piano and I just hiked a mountain, and they talk about all those things, so on grind. So for me personally, I'll open up on something. I've had the last 5 weeks have been an insane grind. So we had our customer conference 2 weeks ago. That was Connections, had almost 300 or 3,000 attendees. But preparing for that while running the business is a huge amount of work to make sure it goes well. Because we had customers we had almost 300 CEOs and general managers. We had 4 solid days, and you're engaging with them, and it's all about and the prep that goes into it, and make sure we had a great experience is incredible. Then came straight out of that and we had our earnings and investors, collaborating with them, and then I had to fly to a couple other places to meet different customers. And on Friday, I was like burned out. And so this weekend, I was not even little R Renaissance guy. I spent the entire weekend doing literally nothing. There was anything that required thought, I wanted no part of it. I had to take 2 phone calls to clean something up with our founder and with one of my peers. But other than that, I actively avoided anything requiring thought. The concept of even picking up a book and thinking about a book, like reading words, was so far from my mind. So in that case, I think this is also where we have to be, admit that we all have our limits. And by modeling out that I have my limits, and then it gives people permission. And that's why it's also really important that we take vacation and notify everybody. Hey, I'm going on holiday. Make sure you take your holidays, right? That permissioning is the most important thing.
Do you also, when you're on holiday, do you have reasonably firm boundaries? Like, like I'm on holiday, but you can always text me, or is it when I'm on holiday, I'm gone?
Oh, I'm super adamant about that. Is that there better be a life-threatening situation if you're pinging me on vacation. So, customers are different because a customer wouldn't know if I'm on holiday or not. And then I'll ping them, and I would generally say, hey, if it's not important, I would say, hey, do you mind if I ping you? I'm just, on travel. By the way, there's lots of times where I've pinged them and they've been on holiday. And I say, oh, it's not important. It's not urgent. Let's talk on Monday, right? And they, customers are respectful too. But my entire team knows I'm going on holiday and I'm turning off. And now, here's the interesting thing. You cannot be finite in your opinions. So there have been many times where, especially as we were going through this big ramp phase in Calix, in the 2017-2018 timeframe, where we were transitioning the company from a hardware company into a software and cloud and appliance company, and those 2018 years were super stressful. We basically were doing the innovator's dilemma, which is building another company while running the existing company. We almost ran out of cash. There was huge stress, right? And so in those scenarios, I was less apt to completely disconnect because, frankly, the leadership team was still forming up. We were bringing new people in. It was almost impossible. So I also think it's not logical or practical to say that that's a hard rule all the time. But with the quality of our leadership team, how it sits today, the U.S. Thanksgiving is coming up, and I'm going to an island. And by the way, the U.S. Thanksgiving, I'm a Canadian, so the U.S. Thanksgiving is by far my favorite holiday. You know why? Because all the Americans are gone. They're all on holiday. They're watching football. They're eating tons of food. There's no emails flying around. And I do Canadian Thanksgiving in October, which means I get to just go sit on a beach. So what will I do during that week? I will do nothing other than read some fun books, sit on a beach, and just relax. And what will come out of that is ideas, right?
Right. It's I don't have it here because I cleared my desk for the interview. I have a little Moleskin notebook, that's like the 3x5. You can put it in a jacket pocket.
I pronounce it Moleskin. Do you have Moleskin? Is that how you pronounce it?
Well, so I pronounced it. I have direct from the actual marketing department at the company. Any pronunciation you want to use is perfectly enough. Fine. Just buy the product. It's an Italian company, and Moleskin is how you pronounce it in Italian. And
there you go.
And Americans pronounce it Moleskin. So by
the way, that's my last name. It's Weening, but the Dutch pronunciation is Weening. So there you go.
Yeah, absolutely. But I find just carrying a little thing around, and then when you do have that flash of insight while you're sitting on the beach, you jot it down, and then you go back to the beach. And if it just makes it super easy.
So have you ever read the book Getting Things Done?
Oh yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm a disciple of getting things done, right? It's very hard to stay on the wagon with that. But one of the most important concepts that Alan has in his book is the concept that our brains are a hard drive and that they get full. And so to your point, the reason why you need that Moleskine, I don't know how to bring myself to say it that way, but the reason why you have that notebook is because of the fact that by writing it down, you radically reduce your stress because you've now deposited it into a place which you trust and know you can get back to it. So your brain will stop pounding away. And in the end, that is one of the biggest elements of stress, is that all these random thoughts don't have somewhere to go. And so you're constantly angsting about the things you need to do. And your brain is incapable of prioritizing. So I need to go and put salt in the water softener. It gets as much angst in your brain as I need to build a new business strategy for the company for the next 5 years, right?
Right. Yeah, it's I don't think you necessarily know this about me, but for 12 years I had the #1 podcast on iTunes in the business category on personal productivity. So,
wow. So you absolutely are a disciple of Alan.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's his stuff is like the foundational concept of pretty much everything.
And by the way, destroyed all of the list mentality that we grew up with the Covey era. Right? ABCs and A1, B1, C1, right?
So I have a question for you about lists. Paper or electronic, and why?
Electronic for sure. Although I do have Post-it notes. So what happens is if I'm in the middle. So if you and I were in a meeting, I always have a Post-it note thing here because to go and put it in electronic requires me to disconnect mentally from us and actually type something out. And one of the firm believers, I'm a firm believer. So, for example, I will berate sales team members who will sit in the customer meeting and type notes because of the fact that I think it's the most impersonal way and actually it creates an artificial barrier between us. So what I will do is I'll keep this Post-it note there and I'll write the action items and then I'll process them afterwards into electronic.
Okay. Interesting. Do you have a backlog that grows, or are you good about keeping up on it and trimming it?
Yeah. Well, so what generally happens is that I have the opportunity to task off to people, and then I use, so for example, one of the way I also use my Outlook calendar for that. So if it's something where I want to go and do it, I'll schedule a 5-minute meeting. Hey, follow up on this. What's the status of that? And so my Outlook is a bit of a nightmare for my assistant because she's like, why are all these 5-minute appointments popping up? Right. And that's because me setting tasks.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. I'm not going to go too
email and Outlook thing too, right?
Right. Yeah. I'm not going to go too far down the rabbit hole because we could talk about productivity systems till the cows come home.
I'm just in the process of coming off of Todoist. which I've been a big believer of managing my personal life with Todoist, and actually I believe that Apple Reminders is now good enough. And I love their cross-platform integration. So.
And the most recent version of Apple Reminders, I just found this out a couple days ago. You can view one of your lists as a Kanban board.
I have just saw that too. I saw that too, and the way that you can actually columnize it. And by the way, everybody listening, what you're hearing is Productivity Geek 101, who are going down Combine boards, all these different things about how do we manage our lives. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's an electronic Post-it note board, in essence.
It's wonderful.
Yes.
One of the things that that you already mentioned, you kind of touched on it, is actually I don't remember if you mentioned it while we were on air or before, but certainly work from home. I mean, you're calling in from your home office, and Calix has. I know you have well over 1,000 employees. You're almost taken? 2,000. Tell me, what are your views on work from home versus return to office? Because that's obviously been very contentious. And, frankly, given the breadth and depth of the different kinds of people you've managed, the different cultures you've been in and countries you've been in, I would imagine if anyone can actually spot what are the real issues for people across cultures, across countries, across different types of functions, it would be you. So enlighten us, please.
Well, thanks for that. But it's just my opinion, and the opinion that we run the company by, based upon an agreement across our organization. And so, the first thing is that I think it depends on. It's definitely situational. So you have to decide what's best for you. So, for example, we have a lot of customers who are in rural America, and they run small offices, and so they may have a team of 30 people, and they have an office, and a commute is 7 minutes, right? So the logic of actually being in the office makes sense. Now the question becomes is the level of flexibility that they offer. So for example, one of the values of one of the real values of hybrid work, whether it's I'm part-time in the office, pick your days, right? This seems to be the debate. What are the amount of days? So pick your days. But giving your employees the flexibility. So, hey, the plumber's coming over, so I want to work from home and I can still do my job really well. And we all proved it. What COVID proved out is productivity can still happen, right? At a very, very high level. And so, or my kids go to daycare and it's out, or it's a PA day at school, right? Like giving your employees the flexibility is something that they value highly, right? Now, we as Calix, this is our philosophy, is that we decided back in 2016 to go all in on remote work. And
so this predates COVID.
Yeah, we were before COVID for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, 100%. And so when I joined the company, people were doing conference calls. The first thing I did was force all conference calls that I was on to be at that time we were using probably GoToMeeting, I think, but I forced video calls, and I said because I was a firm believer that having video in a call radically changes the interaction. And I firmly believe this, right? So we, in 2016, it was within my first 90 days, kind of started to force the company, even though I wasn't running the company, I was running one of the functions, but I basically started to set up that any call I was on, and I would say, hey, turn on your video, turn on your video, turn on your video, right? And I just started that nagging that I've been strategically nagging on for 7 years, which is turn on your video. And I did it at the previous company and the previous company because I thought it was a great way to build connectivity across people. And then we made the conscious choice because of the fact that we were going through this transition. So we're a hardware company building out a software and cloud platform for our industry that is very unique and disruptive. But you go to somebody who's at Google or Facebook or going to a startup or something like that, and you say, hey, come to Calix. And they would have the same reaction that I had when they looked at the website as you're a hardware company and selling to like cable and telco. What? No, I'm going to go to Google or Facebook. So we also had to use this as a way. No, we're becoming a cloud company. You can be part of this amazing transition. It'll be a case study in the innovator's dilemma, which it is. It should be, and you'll get to participate in the evolution of this business. It'll be a once in a lifetime opportunity. And by the way, we are a remote culture, which means that you can live anywhere. And a great story in that was that post-COVID, we had this security person who's now joined our team, and she was one of the reasons why she joined is that her company was going to force her back in the office. And we said, no. And she said, is this real, or are you just going to hoodwink me let me come and then flip me back into an office. Like, well, no. First of all, we don't have an office where you are. And second of all, where do you want to move? As long as you have really great broadband, so you can be on a good video, we're cool. And so she moved to, I believe, rural Tennessee. It was actually with one of our customers who has an incredible network and Calix technology and our software platforms in place and has great experiences. And she's super happy. And so we made that as a conscious choice. And the ones who were holding out were the R&D folks. And what was interesting is a whole bunch of them.
Really? I would have expected the opposite. Okay.
Oh, no. Well, so here's the story. They would always show up on conference calls, because if you're in Silicon Valley, at that pre-COVID, and it's getting back to that bad again, but pre-COVID, traffic was insane, right? And now it's getting bad again, but before then it was crazy. So a lot of them would still work from home, but they're like, no, we need our offices. We got to have our offices, because we want to get together to whiteboard. And I'm like, okay. And so then COVID came and they all went remote, and people left Silicon Valley. They moved off to other places. There's a great migration from California through to, San Antonio, Texas, and, lower taxes and all these, climate, whatever. Right. And so, and then now when COVID came back, I said, so do you still need that office? And you couldn't drag them back with whips and chains and bulldozers, not a chance. Right. And to solve collaboration, we made an investment where everybody gets we bought hundreds of electronic whiteboards. They weren't inexpensive. They were, I don't know, I think $3,000 a piece or something like that. But we felt that from a productivity point of view, it was a good investment. So can't get them back. And so I'm a big believer, you got to do what's right for you. I think a lot of these people are actually using back to office for two reasons. One, it's actually purely a redundant strategy. So what they're doing is trying to force them, and then they say, no, I'm not going to come back. And then they either exit and they don't have to pay for the exit, or they will then make them redundant and say you can't do that and exit them out of the company. And you've seen a whole bunch of companies who use that as a downsizing strategy, and they're just not gutsy enough to actually come out and say that they're downsizing. And then the second one is I think it's a limitation on some managers, right? I'm sure there are roles where you have to be in the office, but there's a number of CEOs who have said, bad culture and all that kind of stuff. Well, we are an imperfect culture, 100%. We are always learning. Our philosophy is better, never best. We are imperfect, but you know what? We're a pretty doggone good culture. And thanks to our team members, that's from the very beginning, or every level inside the organization, everyone cares. And, in an all remote culture, I think we've won 40 cultural awards in the last 18 months.
Well, I was actually going to say, when I was preparing to talk with you, I did a little bit of Googling because we can do that now. And yes. I was just reading award after award, Happiest Employees, 97% satisfaction rating on, I think it was GlassDoor, or there were a couple of them that you were up at that level. Best productivity, best wages and perks. I mean, I was reading this entire thing saying, where were you when I was 25,
Well, where that comes from is that there's a whole bunch of us who are running this company and who are participants in the company who want this place to be the place that they love working. And so, the biggest thing I always say to team members is this, it's fascinating. So no one really speaks this way, which is culture is not a thing, right? And there's a lot of people who, when they talk about culture, what they say is, we have to retain the culture. We have to do this to the culture. We have to do that to the culture, right? And I started about 3 years ago saying to everybody, well, first of all, no culture should ever be retained, because nothing can ever stay static. And the second one is there is no thing of a culture. Culture is actually how each of us treats each other. And if you and I are working together and we treat each other with respect, we have good debates and arguments, but we don't take it personally, and we're both there and we both want each of us to succeed. We're not trying to undermine each other. We're both trying to raise each other up. Then we have a good culture. If one of us in that relationship decides to be a jerk and undermine the other, we have a bad culture. And so in the end, what I say to people is, culture is your responsibility. If this is a great culture, it's because you're a good person, you're a good team member, and you're making everyone around you better. If this is a bad culture, it's because you're a bad person and a bad team member and you're making everyone around you worse. And so you either take accountability for that and do the right thing, or you don't. Don't try to blame someone else. Don't try to say that it's because the culture's bad. You're the culture. So be it.
This is going to be a weird question. Have you ever been to Burning Man?
No, I've read about it, but
Well, I can guarantee you, by the way, that most of what you've read is wrong. I've been 4 times, and
did you go during the muddy season? I read it was very muddy this year.
It was very muddy. The funny part is, people who were actually there had a great time. Like it was, it was the media who was afraid of the mud, not the actual participants.
Exactly, right.
But one of the things that one of the reasons it's my favorite event of any event I've ever been to, is because very much like a company and a culture, and very much in line with what you just described. So a lot of people think of it as, I'm going to go and experience what is there for me to experience.
Right.
That's not the ethos at all. What the ethos is you show up and your experience is going to be what you make. So if you show up and you're like, oh, I don't like the music, well, bring your own music. Like, and when people finally get it, some people have to go, a couple times before, then suddenly it's this huge freeing thing. We're like, oh, I can create the culture that I want to be in, and I can just gather some people who want to create that with me.
Wow. So just imagine, Steve, if we actually applied that to all of our lives, right? Not just cultures and business, not just Burning Man, but everything around us. Is that I went into the grocery store, and what I made of that experience in the grocery store is what I make it, right? Do I go in disgruntled? Do I go in like, wow, how amazing is it that, I have all this food at my fingertips and have so much choice, as opposed to, and by the way, I'm not like this, I think about, I was in the Home Depot and they made me check out on my own and it irritated me, right? And so, hey, what an interesting opportunity that I actually get to check out on my own and learn something, right? So it's that mentality. It's all about, what's your perspective on the situation, right?
Well, you do know that I was reading an article recently that says apparently they have done some studies and they're discovering that things are both more efficient and people are happier with human checkout clerks than with the self-service machines, which was a surprise to me. I was expecting them to say, it's much less efficient, but people want humans. They're like, no, actually it's more efficient because there's that person who doesn't quite know how to scan who's going to be the person in front of you. And
well, by the way, all that they've done is scaled the checkout. Is that there was still two? There was in the Home Depot there was 4, and there were 2 people in the middle watching you. And the second you kind of walked up, they're like, "Hey, do you need any help?" Right? And then they kind of help you scan through it quickly. So and it just what it did was 2 people moved the lines way faster. To your point, it's probably more efficient because of the fact that you're not always waiting in line, and it eliminates all the people who have like 2 things to go through quickly, right? So. Probably is, way just more efficient.
So let's see here. I am curious. I was, you said to me that goals were very important in one of our little pre-back and forths, and we haven't talked about that yet at all. I will say, when I was 16 years, my goal was to be the bubblegum champ of the year, and I'm still working towards it. I discovered that your jaw gets really tired after a certain amount of bubblegum. But
what's the bubblegum champ?
Oh, just being able to blow the biggest bubbles.
Bubblegum champ?
On the
okay,
but when you're 16, it all makes sense. Somehow, when you're older, it becomes a lot less. But why goals? You said goals are very important. What do they do? I mean, we know that we have them, but why are they important?
Well, I think goals are really important because it actually aligns you to where do you want to go. And I think my experience is that there's lots of people who just expect things to be done for them. It kind of goes to the culture thing, right? So I think goals are also about how do you ensure that everybody's accountable for what they're doing and why they're doing it. And so I still remember when I was a new manager, like before I was a manager, I always had very clear goals. I had a plan to get to them. I had a learning plan and all those different elements. And then I went into management, and I remember going through my first employee reviews and asking people, well, what are your career goals and where's your career plan? And the majority of them didn't have it. they couldn't clearly articulate, here's where I want to be in 5 years. Here's where I want to be in 5 years, and here's the steps that I'm going to take to achieve it, right? Which was very counter to how I thought. And I remember saying to one person and they said, well, that's what my manager's going to help me with. And I said, well, wait a second. My job's not to, help you figure out your career. My job is, granted, if you want to have the conversation around where do you want to go long term, for sure, then I can coach you and I can mentor you and those kind of things. But you have to set your own goals. Like, where are you going, right? What do you want to do? And then once you do that, then my job is to get behind you and help you achieve them. So for example, if you want to learn something, take a course, make that things available. So I think goals are important, especially in organizations, because I think they drive accountability and make it so that as an individual, I need to be accountable for what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And then if you actually have goals at an organizational level and cascade them through, which is often done really ineffectively, the best place I've ever seen that done is Salesforce. And so, I've had my own strategies affiliated with it. Then when I was at Salesforce for 4 years, I took a lot of what Benioff did with his Vita Mom process, and I've built that into my own. We call it the CALX, we call it the strategic planning process, SPs. And that's how we cascade through the organization to ensure that everyone has goals, has a plan, and is going forward. But and I think that really becomes important, especially it's important in every organization, but critical if you're going to have a remote organization, because you're not bumping into each other at the coffee machine. It's not as easy to say, hey, can I get a clarification on this, right? Versus through those informal so you need to be very, very focused on how do I set goals. Sure. And there's a Harvard article that was actually, I think it turned out that it was an urban myth and it actually didn't exist. But I think the fundamentals of it are true, which is the story goes is that 40 years ago, they took people, do they have a goal? Do they not? Tracked them through 40 years. And then the ones who had goals were like 16 times better. And I think it turned out to be an urban myth. But the reality is...
someone tried to track down the study and it turned out there was no such study.
Right. Yeah. But it's true. Like, regardless of whether or not it was studied, right? Like... everyone who I know who's achieved great things is because they've had a goal. And achieving great things is, I want to be the best piano player, right? Yep. Tell me those people don't have goals. Like, every day they get up and they practice. Like, do you know a single amazing piano player whose parents didn't support them to pay for lessons as they practiced an hour every day and all that kind of stuff? No. What Gladwell said about 10,000 hours is critical. And to do 10,000 hours to become an expert at something, again, whether or not that's being dispelled too, but the notion of I need to put the hard work in and grind away, you have to start to have the goal. And so right. Very, very important that everybody in the organization has goals. And again, this is a shift in accountability. The culture is ours. If you want it to be great, be accountable for it. And if you want us to succeed as a team, you have to have clear goals and grind at them.
So what might be a provocative or vulnerable question, I don't know, or it might be a completely a ho-hum question. What was the goal, or what is the goal that has driven you up until now, and how did you decide on that particular goal?
So the goal that drove me through my career was financial independence. And it comes from my family struggled financially, and it was tough when I was growing up. And, we hear... I've said this before, and I never wanted to be in the situation where I couldn't pay for my kids, help my kids through school and all that kind of stuff. Like, as how I grew up, I never wanted to be in that place. So that drive for financial independence was a huge motivator for me as a kid. And the story I tell is when I first came out of university, I don't know if this was from Think and Grow Rich from Napoleon Hill or some other book, but all those books have one commonality, which is set goals. And so when I came out of university, I took the number 100,000, I strapped it, I basically taped it to my desk in my bachelor apartment. And I was a salesperson at Canon at the time, and I grinded it out like 90 hours a week because I'm like, I'm going to break $100,000. And at that time, my dad had never done anything close to that. And so, but I just wanted to get over this, and I wanted to pay off my student loans. And so I'm like, I grinded it out. And, my second full year, I beat it. And then, where did my goals go to is that as I was, as my family and all that kind of stuff, we plugged along, there were kind of two seminal moments. One was as I was a sales rep, and I was now managing a team of about 65 people virtually, but I was a sales rep on a bank. And I started to realize how much I was enjoying working with people and actually coaching them and helping my teammates who didn't report to me, but helping them be successful. And so there was this switch in me where my goal started to become, I really wanted to apply a philosophy that I had in life, which was invest in the success of others to be successful. That was my number one sales strategy. If I made all my customers successful, then I would be successful and I'd make my quota. And so I was always focused on, customer success. And then it started to become like, how do I make everybody else around me wildly successful? And then that's when I decided I wanted to become a leader, was when I realized that was the next stage, is that I wanted to do more with people. And so that became a big goal for me.
Yeah, that's really the job of a leader, is to make everyone successful. And then, the leader will be too.
There are a surprising number of leaders who don't understand that.
Well, it's not taught. I mean, maybe if you go to business school or if you study leadership, you hear that. But I found when I was a manager for the first time, I was shocked that there was no one there to really help me figure out what my job was or how to do it. If I hadn't had an MBA and, been highly motivated to go out and read business books and read books on management and psychology and whatever, the best I would have been able to do was to imitate what my managers had done. And they weren't exactly the world's best, so.
By the way, the ones who are not great are also great people to learn from, right? Yeah. Because, I think, if you think back on your career, probably the biggest things that you've learned is when you failed hideously or watched other people fail hideously, right? Because success doesn't really teach you that much, does it? Right?
No.
It's stress and failure and, those kind of things. And so if you're observant, watching other people around you doing wrong things, hey, I shouldn't do that.
Right. And also, even just, just your own experience. I remember talking to someone who was telling me, like, I can't wait to be a manager because my manager treats me like garbage, and I can't wait to be the one who can just slap people. Blah, blah, blah. I was like, wait a minute. I'm like, your manager treats you like garbage. You hate your job and you want to undermine your manager, and now you're saying you want to be the manager whose employees want to undermine them. Like, right. If you really thought that one through,
did you not learn that lesson, right?
Yeah, so.
But by the way, that is a fairly prevalent view, right? Is that that I was treated poorly, and then I can't wait till I'm in the power to go treat other people poorly, right? Like, yeah. But that's a very cynical view versus I want to go and do that so that never happens again. Should be the motivator, right?
Yeah, I learned that one from my parents. Man, the amount of my adult life which has been motivated by I don't want to make the same mistakes my parents made. It's a powerful learning.
That was the same. I believe my father got taken advantage of in business by a number of people, and I also, and that's why he had those financial problems. And I'm like, I will never be that. I'm like, no one will take advantage of me. I will build a great organization around me, and I will be financially independent. That drove me out of through university like crazy, right? So, and then it morphed into something else as it was achieved, which is great.
Right. So to shift off business for a minute, what do you do for fun? What is bubblegum for the brain?
Oh yeah, right. So there's this guy, Paul Shearstone. He's wrote a few books. I was very fortunate when I was coming out of university. I'll tell you two stories: 5 No's to Make a Yes and bubblegum for the brain. So when I first came out of university, to your point on managers and bad managers, there's one of the things that happened was, how do I say this? Okay, so I came in and I had learned that the most important thing I should do when I take on a new job is do two things. One, find out who the best person is at that job and learn from them. And the second one is find out how much they make and whether or not that's enough. So my first job out of university was selling corrugated cardboard. I met the best sales rep and he was making no money, and I realized, wow, I need to get another job. And I flopped that in like literally 2 months, and then I landed, at the Cant job. And then I found out who the best sales rep was, and everyone talked about an incredible rock star he was. And so I pursued him. And so I phoned him, left him a voicemail. I said, "Hey, Paul, I'd really love to travel with you for a day. I'm a lifelong learner. I'm really learning how to sell, and I'd like to learn from you." Didn't return my call. So I called again. No return call. And I called again. And I called again. And I called again. And this was over like 6 weeks. I would give him a week, I would call. And so 5 weeks, right? Every week I'd call. "Hi, it's Michael Weening. You maybe didn't get my voicemail." I was polite. I'm like, "I'd really like the opportunity to spend time with you." And on the fifth call, he returned my call. And he said, "Hi, this is Paul. Yes, I will give you an opportunity to spend time with me. Come to my house at this time and make sure you bring a notepad." And I said, "Sure, great, fantastic." And so I showed up, and beautiful house, all that kind of stuff. And they walk in, and he taught me two of the most seminal lessons that I've had throughout my career in the first 5 minutes. He said, the first thing he said was, "What'd you do on the way over?" And it was, gosh, this is 1992, right? And so, and I was driving a little Volkswagen Fox or something like that. And, I had no money, and, I was starting out and just out of university. And I said, "Well, I listen to the radio." And he goes, "The radio is bubblegum for the brain." And he goes, "You chew it, there's no nutritional value." He goes, "Start listening to tapes." He goes, "You need to be listening to books because there's so much knowledge out there. Don't waste your time. And you have so much to learn. You need to take every second you can and not listen to the radio and do that." And at that time, tapes weren't like Audible today. Like $10 you buy a book. It's amazing. It's like, it's so inexpensive to be a lifelong learner, right? Between podcasts and books and all these kind of things. But you think back 1992, there's nothing. So the only way I could afford it is I found a company that rented audiobooks, and I would drive there and I would rent them. And it was like $10 to rent them for a week because I couldn't afford the books.
Right.
The Tony Robbins books, to buy those on tapes, they were like $500, right? I think when I first came out of school, my salary was like $1,000 a month, right? Like,
Yeah, that would.
So that was the first.
Wow.
Right. And then, and then I said to him, "By the way, I called you 5 times. Why didn't you return my call before then?" And he goes, "That's your second lesson. It takes 5 no's to make a yes." And he goes, "Every sales manager," he goes, "the majority of sales managers are bad." And he goes, "And the first thing that they do is they say to their new hires, they say, go and work with Paul. He's the best sales rep in the company, and go have him teach you." Right. And so they slough off to me, and he goes, "And so I've got this rule, 5 no's to make a yes." And he goes, "Everyone calls me, and they call once, they call twice, maybe they call 3 times." He goes, "You're the first one in the entire history to actually call 5 times."
Wow. That's, that I think that's something, it's funny because we kind of got here just as, casual conversation at the very end here, but I think that's a fairly profound story, especially if you're going to be a salesperson, because if you're in a business where you need to do 10 touches before somebody will pay attention to you, which given information overload is not an unreasonable assumption to make, and you do 8 touches instead of 10, you can have a prospect list of 1,000 customers and make 0 sales, or you can have a prospect list of 10 customers and make all 10 touches, and then boom, you've got 10 sales. And it's
in the space of 5 minutes, he reinforced something that I had learned on my own through university, which was, be a learner. Like all through university, I was the goofy one who was reading business books. And I hated my business classes. I found them useless, but I loved reading business books. And I was working at a menswear store, and the guys who were around me, the salespeople, they were just killer. And I learned so much from them, and they were all reading, and they taught me to read, right? So reinforced learning is really important. That was the bubble gum for the brain. But then also that, I've always had tenacity, but he just put it into the perfect term that I've used literally 10,000 times teaching people. It takes 5 no's to make a yes, right? And then the third one that he said, which is a little bit hard, I need a graph paper to show it. He goes, this was the other profound lesson that he gave me that's lived with me all my life. And he said, success equals 15. So now I'm going to try and explain this verbally versus graphically. Okay. And he had a piece of paper, and he basically put 3 columns, and they were all the same size, and they had a 5 across them. And he goes, success equals 15. And he goes, here's the 3, doesn't matter what job you're doing. here are the 3 elements of success. And he said, the first one is we'll call territory, because we were talking about sales, but it could be your job. He goes, we assume your job is a 5 because everybody has the same opportunity to succeed. Okay. So that's 5 out of 15. He goes, the next 2 columns are skill and time. And he goes, let's graph you. And he goes, skill, 1 out of 5, right? He goes, you're so green, right? 1 out of 5. And he goes, so what does that add up to? I'm fast with math. I said 6, right? And he goes, well, what's left? And I said, well, the only thing that's left is time. And he goes, so how do you get to 15? I said, 9. And he goes, right. And he goes, every job you ever do from now until you stop working, think of it that way. Because what's going to happen is you change jobs. What's going to happen is your skill level is going to drop radically. And he goes, and the only way you can overcompensate for that to actually get to be successful is by driving your time up. So you got to think about it. He goes, now here's the most important thing is, and this is what people don't do. He goes, you also, as you go through your career, and let's say you're in that role for a year, if you're still a 1 out of 5 and you're still having to put in a 9 to get to success, you're probably in the wrong job. And so you need to constantly be assessing yourself as to whether or not it's starting to shift. He goes, look at me. He goes, I'm a 9 skill, so I can put a 1 for time and succeed. He goes, I put a 3 in, so I'm an 18 instead of a 15. And that's why I crush it every year. And he had a profound impact on me in that first meeting. Those were the 3 stories he told me. And those basically were foundational for who I became and how I live my life.
Wow. So now I want to do another hour just on that, because as you're describing that, I'm like adding up numbers. I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah. Well, success equals 15. It's a profoundly powerful life lesson. And there were a bunch of other ones that he gave me. He's a great guy to talk to. I can always put you in contact with him. He's retired now, but I'm sure he would love to have a conversation. So
that would be fabulous. Well, thank you. Our time is up, and I irresponsibly let us go for 2 extra minutes because I wanted to hear how the story ended. Yeah. Thank you very much, Michael. Is there anything? Normally if I have somebody who's selling a book or something, I say, where can they find you? I don't know if you want to be found.
I have no books to sell. So just a wonderful opportunity. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. You've done it's wonderful for you to take the time to share with us. Take care.
Thanks.